Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping into a really core topic today, fundamental to how the U.S. works, actually. It's all about voting and elections.
Yeah, and thanks to the material our listeners sent over, we've got a great chapter to guide us. It covers, the whole journey, voter registration, turnout, how elections actually run.
Campaigns, voting behavior, even direct democracy.
Exactly, the full picture.
And the goal, our listeners' mission here, is to get a really solid grasp on these key bits, find some surprising details maybe, and just feel informed without, getting totally overwhelmed.
Makes sense. It can be a lot.
Okay, so right off the bat, something in the intro jumped out at me. It mentioned Pete Buttigieg back in 2020.
Ah, yeah.
How he had relatively limited government experience, but he could still explain complex policy really clearly. And he was willing to do interviews on Fox News, which was, well, unusual.
Right. It highlights that campaigning isn't just one thing, is it? It's multifaceted. You need the policy chops, the communication skills, the strategic outreach.
Totally. And it brings us straight to those big questions the source material asks. What actually gets voters to the polls? And how do they decide who to vote for once they're there?
Those are the key threads, definitely. We'll be pulling on those throughout.
Okay, let's start with voter registration then. Seems like the logical first step. The gateway, really.
It is, but it's surprisingly not uniform across the country.
Right. The material points out these big state-by-state differences.
Huge differences. I mean, think about that example they gave the 85-year-old retiree. Let's say their ID expired.
Okay.
In California, maybe Florida, registering might still be pretty easy, but try that in Texas or Indiana, could be a serious roadblock.
Wow. So it really depends where you live.
Absolutely. This catchwork approach is it's a defining feature of U.S. elections. And you have to wonder about the philosophies behind it, Is the goal maximum participation or maximum security against fraud? And what are the trade-offs?
And this variability isn't new, is it? The source material dives into some, well, pretty grim history.
Oh, yeah. After the Civil War, registration was weaponized, deliberately used to stop people voting.
Specifically African Americans.
Primarily, yes. You had literacy tests, for instance.
Which could be totally subjective.
Exactly. Administered arbitrarily. Then there were poll taxes, a direct financial barrier.
Until the 24th Amendment finally got rid of those for federal election.
Right, in 64. And don't forget the grandfather clauses. It's just blatant discrimination, basically saying if your ancestor couldn't vote before the Civil War, neither could you.
Even though the Supreme Court struck those down eventually.
In 1915, yeah. But the point is, these weren't small hurdles. This was systematic disenfranchisement, often backed up with violence and pure intimidation.
Which makes the Voting Rights Act of 1965 such a landmark. The material really stresses its importance.
It was transformative, truly.
Yeah.
It didn't just outlaw discriminatory laws based on race. It gave the federal government the power to step in.
Federal examiners.
Yep. Sent into areas with histories of discrimination to oversee registration, oversee the elections themselves. And maybe the biggest piece was preclearance.
Requiring certain states to get approval before changing election laws.
Exactly. States with a bad track record needed federal okay first. And the impact was immediate. Black voter registration shot up in places like Mississippi, Alabama between 65 and 68. Dramatic increases.
But then, Shelby County v. Holder, 2013, that changed things again.
It did. A major shift. The Supreme Court essentially struck down that preclearance formula.
Why? What was the reasoning?
The argument was basically that the conditions justifying it back in 65 weren't the same anymore, that those states had made progress.
So no more federal pre-approval needed for those places.
Right. Power shifted back to the state and local level. And as the source material notes, what followed in some states was a wave of new voting laws that critics saw as restrictive. It really reopened that debate about protecting voting rights.
Okay, so bringing it to today. Efforts to get people registered look pretty different now, depending on the state.
Yeah, you see a real spectrum. Oregon's got automatic voter registration, trying to make it seamless.
And North Dakota doesn't even require registration at all.
Right. Quite the outlier.
Yeah.
Then you have states pioneering online registration. Arizona was way ahead of the curve back in 2002.
Linking up with DMV data makes sense.
Totally. Now you've got, over 18 states doing it or planning to? It's convenient.
But not everyone's on board.
No. There's the cost, The initial setup can be hundreds of thousands of dollars according to the source. Plus, ongoing worries about security, potential fraud.
Like in Texas, preferring paper.
Exactly. They cite those security concerns. Though, it's interesting how citizen pressure can play a role too, like getting Florida to eventually adopt online registration.
So for someone wanting to register, what are the nuts and bolts?
Okay, assuming you're not in North Dakota,
Yeah.
you need an application, paper or online.
Basic info, name, address.
Yep. Name, address, usually an option for party affiliation, though that's optional.
Yeah.
And you have to affirm you're eligible, citizen, competent, voting age.
Residency requirement too, usually.
Often 30 days, yeah. Having a government ID can definitely smooth out the online process.
And timing is key, right? Deadlines vary a lot.
Massively.
Yeah.
Some states make you register maybe 30 days before the election. Others, 14 states plus D.C. now have same-day registration. You just need proof of residency.
That must make a difference in turnout.
It does. The source says states with same-day registration saw about a 4% bump in turnout back in 2012.
Yeah.
That's not insignificant.
And changing parties for primaries, that has deadlines too in some places.
Oh, yeah, in closed primary states, definitely.
Yeah.
Like New York in the 2016 primaries, that caught some people out. And just moving, especially for college students, it's easy to forget you need to re-register or update your address.
Have there been federal efforts to make this easier, like motor voter?
Yes, the National Voter Registration Act of '93 Motor Voter. The idea was simple. Register when you get your driver's license or access certain social services.
Did it work?
It boosted registration numbers, yeah, about 7% between '92 and 2012. But interestingly, it didn't cause a huge surge in actual turnout. Seems like mostly people who were already planning to vote used it.
What about pre-registration for young people?
Now, that seems promising. Florida saw a 13% increase in youth turnout with pre-registration, letting teens sign up before they hit 18.
And Oregon just automatically registers them.
Pretty much. Uses DMV data when they turn 18, updates the rolls if they move. It's efficient.
Any controversy there?
Some pushback, yeah. Privacy concerns, And some see it as a step towards mandatory voting arguments, but the main goal is clearly boosting participation.
Another piece is keeping the voter rolls accurate. That phantom voter issue from Florida 2000 sounds messy.
It was. People who'd moved or passed away still being listed. The Help America Vote Act, HAVA, in 2002 tried to address that, mandated better equipment, accessibility, computerized state rolls.
And states do their own cleaning, too.
Well, yeah. Louisiana flags ineligible voters, might cancel registration after missing 2 general elections. Oklahoma checks death records. There's even an interstate cross-check program trying to catch duplicates across 29 states.
Though some methods, like using that federal SAVE database in Florida, have been controversial.
Definitely. Balancing accuracy with not accidentally purging eligible voters is tricky.
Okay, so bottom line on eligibility. Citizen, resident, 18, anything else?
Those are the basics. States add layers, though. Competency, not being currently incarcerated, that's common.
What about people with felony convictions?
That varies wildly. Kentucky can be very restrictive, often needing a pardon. Florida, Mississippi, Nevada have pathways to restore rights. Then you've got Vermont and Maine on the other end. Very few restrictions. Maine even lets incarcerated citizens vote.
Wow. Any other weird requirements?
A couple odd ones mentioned. Wisconsin says you can't wager on an election you vote in. Vermont has a voter's oath.
Okay, and finally on registration. The college student problem. Register at school or back home?
It's a real choice. Register near campus. Easier to vote on election day, maybe, but you need to learn local politics. Register back home. Familiar candidates, but might mean dealing with absentee ballots or traveling.
Does it affect turnout?
Seems so. The research suggests students living further from their home voting address are less likely to vote. That's another logistical hurdle.
Right, so registration is hurdle 1. But getting registered doesn't mean you actually vote. Let's talk turnout.
Yeah, who votes and why or why not? Campaign managers obsess over this.
Trying to predict who'll show up. Age, education, income seem like big factors according to the source.
Consistently the strongest predictors, yes. But first, it's actually kind of important how we measure turnout. The numbers can look really different depending on what you count.
Okay, how so? The material mentioned a few ways.
Right. You could look at turnout as a percentage of the total population. It gives the lowest number because it includes kids, non-citizens, everyone.
Then there's voting age population, VAP.
Yep, everyone 18 and older.
Yep.
Better, but still includes folks who aren't eligible, like non-citizens or incarcerated individuals in most states.
So voting eligible population, VEP, is more accurate.
Arguably, yes. Citizens 18 plus in, not imprisoned.
Yeah.
It gives a better sense of potential turnout among those who can vote.
And finally, just registered voters, which gives the highest percentage.
Exactly. So 2020, for example, turnout was about 77% of registered voters. Sounds high, right?
Yeah.
But it was only around 62% of the VAP and maybe 67% of the VEP. Still needs a lot of potential voters on the sidelines.
Yeah.
And you got to be careful comparing percentages across years if the number of registered voters changed a lot.
Like more total people voted in 2020 than 2012, even if the percentage of registered voters turning out was slightly lower?
Precisely. Because the pool of registered voters was bigger, context matters.
So who do campaigns target? Who is likely to vote?
Well, they definitely focus on likely voters, people already registered who vote consistently, and registered voters generally.
What about trying to get new people registered and voting?
In competitive states, absolutely. They'll target unregistered folks in the VEP, though sometimes that gets controversial, like the Acorn stuff back in 2008, or criticisms about registering homeless populations.
And those demographic factors, age.
Age is huge. Turnout is consistently lowest among 18 to 25-year-olds, highest among the 65 to 74 bracket.
Why the difference?
Younger folks move more often, might feel disconnected, maybe parties don't target them as much. Older voters, often more settled, more reliant on government programs like Social Security and Medicare, so higher stakes.
Socioeconomic status, too. Education, income.
Very strong correlation.
Right.
Higher education, higher income generally means higher turnout.
Yeah.
Like 80% of college grads voted in 2020 versus 60% of non-grads. Over 80% for incomes over 150K versus maybe 55% for those under 25K.
What about race and ethnicity?
Historically, white voters have had the highest turnout rates, around 71% in 2020, followed by African Americans at 63%, then Asian Americans at 59%, and Hispanic citizens around 54%. But steep political culture matters too. Hispanic turnout is often higher in places like New Mexico, for example.
And gender.
Used to be a bigger gap, but now more women vote than men. Record numbers in 2016. Women tend to lean slightly more Democratic overall.
Okay, let's flip it. What keeps turnout relatively low in the U.S. compared to some other places?
Well, the big one is we don't have mandatory voting. Unlike, say, Belgium or Turkey, when Chile switched from mandatory to voluntary, their turnout dropped significantly.
What else? Voter ID laws?
That's a big debate. Proponents say they prevent fraud, though widespread in-person fraud is pretty rare according to most studies. Opponents argue they disproportionately hurt minority groups, the elderly, low-income folks who might have trouble getting the specific IDs required.
There have been court cases about this.
Oh, yeah. Indiana's strict photo ID law was challenged but upheld. Crawford v. Marion County. Texas had a law blocked, then implemented after Shelby County gutted pre-clearance. Getting the right documents could be a real burden for some.
What about just the logistics of voting? Polling place hours?
That's a factor. Election day being a Tuesday, limited hours. It's tough for people juggling work, school, childcare.
Doesn't early voting help with that?
It's meant to. Many states open polls up to 2 weeks early. Texas saw an initial bump, then it leveled off. Results are mixed nationally, but it was huge EE in 2020, over 100 million early votes cast, largely due to the pandemic.
And mail-in voting. Some states do it for everyone now, right?
Yeah. Colorado, Hawaii, Oregon, Utah, Washington have all-mail systems. It's generally associated with higher turnout. Colorado saw it chunty.
Any downsides?
Some worry about not being able to change your vote if big news breaks late, those October surprises, or potential pressure at home. But it's definitely convenient.
Then there's just apathy, feeling like your vote doesn't count.
That's definitely part of it. If you live in a state or district dominated by one party, or if you're a third-party supporter, it can feel futile. That chronic minority idea.
Voter fatigue, too. Just too many elections.
Yeah, with local, state, federal elections happening pretty often, people can just get burned out. And finally, some people, especially younger folks, might choose not to vote as a protest, or they might prioritize other forms of engagement, like volunteering.
Okay, deep breath. We've covered registration and turnout. Now, the actual elections. Choosing leaders. It starts with someone deciding to run.
Right, and that's a big decision. There are the official hurdles. First, maybe getting signatures, paying fees, meeting residency and age rules.
But then the personal stuff kicks in.
Big time. Who else is running? What's the impact on your family? Can you actually raise the money you'll need? And you have to be ready for your whole life to be put under a microscope by the media.
Does that deter people?
It certainly can. While the pool of people running might be slightly more diverse than who actually wins, the grind of campaigning definitely puts some people off. Especially if you're in a district heavily favoring the other party.
Who tends to run then?
Often people moving up from lower office, or professionals with flexible jobs, lawyers, business owners, and gender differences come up here too.
How so?
Family obligations tend to weigh more heavily on women deciding whether to run. They often enter politics later. Balancing campaigning and parenting is tough. It contributes to fewer, and often older, women in higher office, though 2018 saw some real gains.
You mentioned competitive versus open seats. What's the difference?
Competitive seat means a challenger is taking on the incumbent, the person already in office, and incumbents win a
Or
lot.
a seat.
That's when the incumbent isn't running again. Those races attract way more candidates because there's no built-in incumbent advantage to overcome. It's seen as a better opportunity.
And money, the campaign war chest, how important is that?
Hugely important. It's the campaign's bank account, registered with the FEC. Having money left over from previous races or raising a lot early.
It signals viability.
Exactly. Shows you're serious, helps attract more donors. Challengers without much money or name recognition really struggle to get off the ground.
Which brings us to campaign finance law. Sounds like a minefield. And it goes way back.
Oh, yeah. Concerns about money's influence are not new. Way back in 1907, the Tillman Act banned corporations giving directly to federal candidates.
Then things got more serious in the 70s. FECA.
Right. The Federal Election Campaign Act of 1971 brought in reporting requirements, formally allowed PAC's political action committees. Then amendments in 74 created the Federal Election Commission, the FEC, to enforce the rules.
But the courts weighed in. Buckley v. Vallejo.
Landmark case in 76. The Supreme Court said some limits, particularly on candidates spending their own money, violated free speech. Money equals speech, essentially. That complicated things.
Fast forward to 2002. McCain-Feingold, the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, BCRA. What was that trying to fix?
The main target was soft money. Money given to political parties for party building, not directly to candidates. It was a huge loophole with fewer restrictions. BCRA tried to ban most soft money donations to national parties.
What else did it do?
Put limits on ads by unions and corporations that named candidates close to an election, and that I approve this message requirement, the candidate endorsement on ads.
Did it stick?
It faced immediate challenges. McConnell v. FEC upheld parts of it, but later court cases chipped away, removing limits on personal spending again and on interest group ads.
And then the big one, Citizens United.
2010, game changer. The Supreme Court ruled, again on free speech grounds, that the government couldn't restrict independent political spending by corporations and unions.
Leading to super PAC.
Exactly. Independent expenditure-only committees. They can raise and spend unlimited amounts of money to support or attack candidates. The key is they can't directly donate to or coordinate with the campaign, but they can run tons of ads.
And they spend huge amounts.
It's billions in recent cycles, yeah. The source probably gives examples from 2020 or 2012. It dramatically reshaped the landscape.
But there are still limits on direct contributions, right? To candidates and regular PAC.
Yes, individuals still have limits per candidate, per election. Limits on giving to traditional PACs to national parties.
Yeah.
PACs have limits on what they can give. Those amounts get adjusted for inflation. But the independent spending is where the big money slows now.
Okay, let's shift to the nomination stage. How do parties actually pick their candidates?
Parties are key here, especially for president and Congress. But the actual rules are mostly set at the state level. State laws, control of the methods, the schedule.
Mostly primaries, though.
Primaries are the most common way now for state, local, and presidential races. Party members vote using a ballot.
But different kinds of primaries exist. Closed, open.
Right, closed primary. Only registered members of that party can vote. So only registered Democrats vote in the Democratic primary, Republicans in the Republican one. Parties often prefer this keeps the choice within the family, supposedly leads to more loyal nominees.
Open primary.
Any registered voter can choose one party's primary to vote in. Doesn't matter how you're registered.
And top two, jungle primaries.
Less common. California uses it, some others. All candidates, regardless of party, are on one ballot. The top two finishers, even if they're from the same party, advance to the general election, often used for nonpartisan races too.
Can states just invent any system they want?
The Supreme Court has kind of limited it to closed and open systems, arguing parties have a right to determine who associates with them.
What about caucuses? They sound different.
Very different. Used in fewer states now. Iowa is the famous one, but also in Nevada, Colorado, a few others. Instead of voting, it's a meeting.
A meeting? How does that work?
Party members gather in schools, churches, community centers. They physically group themselves by candidate preference, listen to speeches, try to persuade each other. Then there's often a process of realigning if a candidate doesn't meet a viability threshold. Eventually, delegates are selected based on those preference groups. It can involve math, sometimes standing under signs, even dropping marbles in some historical cases.
Pros and cons.
Proponents say it's more engaging, more deliberative, creates more informed voters. Cons: huge time commitment, can be intimidating. Turnout is typically way lower than primaries, like 20% lower.
And the timing of these primaries and caucuses causes drama, right?
Yeah.
Front loading.
Oh, yeah. The national parties try to keep states in line, push them to hold contests later, like March or after, except for the traditional early states, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina.
But states want to go earlier.
They want influence. Going early means candidates spend more time and money there, voters get more attention. So states kept leapfrogging each other earlier and earlier. That's front-loading. It was really intense around 2008.
How do the national parties fight back?
They try. They can mess with delegate counts, offer bonus delegates for going later, like in '96, or penalize states for going too early by cutting their delegate numbers, which happened in '08.
How are delegates allocated anyway, based on state size?
It's based on state party registration and past support, mostly. So a big state like California gets way more delegates than a small state like Wyoming.
It seems like the whole nomination process has shifted away from party bosses controlling things.
Definitely. It's much more candidate-driven now. You need money, media buzz, momentum from early wins, and direct voter support in these primaries and caucuses.
Does this lead to different kinds of candidates?
Maybe. We see more candidates without deep political roots sometimes. And because primary caucus voters can be more ideological than the general electorate, some argue it pushes candidates to more extreme positions to win the nomination, though moderates certainly still win primaries too.
After all that, we get the convention season. Seems kind of anticlimactic now if the nominee is already known.
Yeah, the suspense is mostly gone. The period after the last primaries is often quieter, focused on fundraising.
Yeah.
Then come the conventions, state and national, June through September.
What actually happens there?
Officially, they adopt the party platform, debating planks, figuring out the party's stance on issues. Lots of planning, speeches. State conventions get local coverage. The national ones are huge media events.
Big speeches are key.
Yep. Family members, rising stars, the VP nominee, and finally the presidential nominee's acceptance speech. Big moments for the campaign. Usually, the party holding the White House goes second.
2020 was weird, though, with COVID.
Totally. Lots of virtual elements, much less traditional fanfare. But usually it's about the official delegate vote casting, finalizing the platform, unifying the party, and getting that post-convention bump in popularity from all the positive media.
Even if the VP pick is usually known by them, too.
Yeah, surprises are rare these days. It's more about messaging and momentum heading into the fall.
Which brings us to the general election sprint, mid-August to early November.
Right. Now it's usually one nominee per major party, plus maybe some minor party candidates.
And the focus shifts.
Yeah. Party ID locks in maybe half the voters.
Yeah.
So campaigns zero in on swing voters, independents, and making sure their own base turns out, especially in battleground states.
Candidates adapt their strategies too, right?
Oh, constantly. Like in 2016, you saw Clinton spending time in Arizona, Trump focusing hard on the Rust Belt reacting to perceived opportunities or weaknesses. And 2020 showed starkly different approaches due to COVID. Trump's rallies versus Biden's more virtual strategy.
Debates become important here too.
Crucial. Presidential debates, key Senate, or governor debates. Voters get to see candidates side by side under pressure.
That first televised one, Kennedy-Nixon in 1960, is legendary.
Absolutely. Showed how much appearance and delivery mattered on TV. People listening on the radio thought Nixon won. TV viewers leaned Kennedy. Still relevant today. They're usually ruled to prevent weird camera tricks or advantages.
And Election Day itself, always that first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Why then?
Historical reasons, mostly. Tied to the 19th century agricultural calendar after the harvest before winter set in, and avoiding Sundays or the start end of the month for religious or accounting reasons.
Okay, can't talk presidential elections without the Electoral College. Still confuses a lot of people.
It's definitely unique. Remember, you're not directly voting for president. You're voting for electors pledged to a candidate.
And each state gets electors based on its congressional delegation.
Exactly. Number of representatives plus its 2 senators. D.C. gets 3. Total of 538 electors nationwide.
Need 270 to win.
Right. A majority. These electors meet in their state capitals in December to cast their votes, usually for whoever won the state's popular vote.
Then the VP counts them in January.
Yep, during a joint session of Congress. If someone hits 270, they're the president-elect.
What if there's a tie, where no one gets 270?
Very rare. But then the House of Representatives decides the presidency. Each state delegation gets 1 vote.
Have electors always been chosen this way? Pledged party members.
It evolved. Early on, state legislatures often pick them. Now, Parties nominate loyal members, reducing the chance of faithless electors who ignore the state's popular vote.
But faithless electors still happen sometimes.
They do. Small numbers in 2000, 2004, a few more in 2016. Hasn't changed an outcome yet, but it's a quirk.
And most states are winner-take-all.
48 states plus D.C. Win the popular vote by one vote, you get all the state's electoral votes.
Except Maine and Nebraska.
Right. They use the district method. 2 electoral votes go to the statewide winner. Then 1 electoral vote goes to the popular vote winner in each congressional district. So they can split their votes, and sometimes do. Nebraska split one in 2008. Maine split one in 2020.
And quickly, midterm elections. What's their deal?
Held in the even years between presidential races. All House seats are up, plus a third of the Senate.
And they often go against the president's party?
That's the pattern. In presidential years, you might see a coattail effect. The winning president helps their party down ballot. Midterms often have a reverse coattail. The president's party loses seats, often seen as voters reacting to the president's performance. Control of Congress frequently flips in midterms.
Okay, so that's the structure. Let's talk campaign strategy. How do they actually try to win?
Core goals are simple. Reach voters with information. Get your supporters to actually vote. Lots of targeting likely voters.
And fundraising is oxygen.
Absolutely critical. That phrase, early money is like yeast, from Emily's List is spot on. Raising money early shows you're credible, helps the campaign grow, attracts more money.
But the sources probably show how early fundraising often predicts success in primaries.
Usually, yeah. Candidates who led early in fundraising in, say, the 2016 Republican primary, like Bush or Cruz, were seen as serious contenders. Those who struggled, like Jindal or Pataki, faded quickly.
Though Trump was an exception in 2016, lower fundraising.
He was, yeah. Got massive free media coverage, plus the ability to self-fund if needed. And the 2020 Democratic primary had lots of candidates with significant cash before Biden pulled ahead. Money matters, but it's not everything.
How are primary campaigns different from general election campaigns?
Big differences. Primaries. Often crowded field, same party, so party ID isn't the deciding factor. Need name recognition, visibility. Media is crucial for newcomers. Ads often focus on specific issue positions to differentiate yourself. Think Clinton's holiday ad or Huckabee's Huck Chuck ad mentioned in the sources.
General.
Usually one-on-one from the major parties. Focus shifts to undecideds and motivating your base. Ads get more comparative. Here's why I'm better. Here's why they're worse. Reminding loyalists why they're loyal. Think classic negative ads like Johnson's Daisy Girl, or maybe Biden's 2020 ads contrasting with Trump. Emotion plays a bigger role.
And negative ads often come from outside groups, super PACs.
A lot of the really sharp-edged stuff does, yeah. Those shadow campaigns. Groups like Swift Boat Veterans for Truth Against Kerry in '04 or Move On ads. Super PACs spent fortunes on attack ads in 2020. It lets the candidate maintain a slightly cleaner image sometimes.
And then there's just grinding out the vote, GOTV.
Get out the vote.
Yeah.
Hugely important, especially in close races. Mobilizing your known supporters. The Bush campaign's effort in Ohio in 2004 is a classic example of intense GOTV.
Technology must have changed everything here.
Fundamentally. I mean, negative campaigning itself is ancient, that coffin handbill against Andrew Jackson in 1828. But TV changed the game.
From jingles to image ads.
Exactly. Early TV ads were simple. Then you get more sophisticated stuff, like Kennedy's ads, focusing on image and energy. And remember, BCRA forced candidates to put their face on TV ads, say they approved it.
What about reaching voters outside traditional news, soft news?
Yeah, infotainment shows like The Daily Show, Last Week Tonight, they became important stops for candidates, especially around '08, '16, trying to reach younger demographics, seem more relatable.
And then the internet blew everything up.
Completely. Websites for info started around 2000. Search engine ads let you target voters. Online fundraising became massive FINRAD. Howard Dean's campaign in '04 was an early pioneer there.
Social media?
Huge. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Direct interaction, mobilizing supporters, rapid spread of info, and unfortunately misinformation. Platforms are still struggling with how to handle that.
So when a voter actually has the ballot, how do they decide? Seems complicated. People must use shortcuts.
They absolutely do. It's too much information otherwise. Party affiliation is the biggest shortcut. Voting your party line is often rational, aligns with your general ideology.
Leads to straight ticket voting.
Often, yeah. Just check the box for one party all the way down. But that can cause ballot fatigue.
What's that?
Getting tired as you go down a long ballot. Voters might just stop voting for races further down, like judicial elections in some states. The Colorado example in the source might mention this.
Do things like how a candidate looks matter?
Subconsciously, probably yes. Attractiveness, facial cues people associate with competence. Gender, race voters might make assumptions, consciously or not. Age is often discussed. McCain 08, maybe Clinton 16 for gender. It can feed into perceptions.
What about the actual issues? The economy?
Major factors, of course. Some people are single-issue voters, abortion, guns, environment. Others weigh multiple issues. The economy is almost always huge.
Retrospective voting. Pocketbook voting.
Right. Retrospective is looking back. How has the incumbent party done? How's the economy overall? Pocketbook is more personal. How am I doing financially?
Prospective voting.
Trying to predict the future. Based on candidates' plans and past behavior, who do you think will do a better job going forward?
Strategic voting.
That's when you vote for maybe your second or third choice because you think your top choice can't win and you really want to stop someone else from winning. Trying to be tactical.
And finally, the power of incumbency seems huge.
It really is. Re-election rates, especially in the House, are incredibly high. Why? Name recognition, a voting record to point to, easier immediate access, way more bagel and interest group money flows to incumbents.
Bringing privileges.
Yeah, sending official mail using taxpayer money. Plus, existing campaign teams, often leftover war chests. And crucially, for House members and state legislators, gerrymandering.
Drawing district lines to help your party win.
Exactly. Doesn't affect senators or presidents, but massively shapes House races and state legislatures.
Yeah.
Creates safe seats, reduces competition.
Okay, last big topic. Direct democracy. Letting citizens vote directly on laws.
Right. Most U.S. elections are indirect. We elect people to represent us. But the progressive era brought in ways for citizens to have more direct power, especially in newer Western states.
Like town meetings locally.
Yeah, that's a local form, classic New England style. But statewide, it affects constitutions, budgets, laws. More common out west.
What are the main types at the state level?
3 big ones. First, the referendum. Citizens vote to approve or reject something the government already decided.
2 kinds of that.
Legislative referendum. The legislature puts a proposed law or amendment on the ballot for voters to ratify. Popular referendum. Citizens petition to get a law the legislature already passed, put on the ballot, potentially to repeal it. That one's often harder to do.
Second type, initiative, proposition.
This is maybe the most powerful. Citizens themselves propose and pass laws or constitutional amendments, completely bypassing the legislature and governor, though courts can still review them.
How does that work, getting it on the ballot?
It's a process. File paperwork, get the text reviewed, then the big one. Gather signatures, lots of them, usually a percentage based on votes in the last election. Rules vary on deadlines. Who can collect signatures if they can be paid?
Then verification and campaigning.
Yep. Verify the signatures, get it on the ballot, then campaigns for and against kick in. States like California often have tons of these. Timing matters too. Primary ballot versus general election ballot might attract different voters.
And the third type, recall?
Less common, but potent. Voters decide whether to remove an elected official before their term is up. Governor Gray Davis in California getting recalled is a famous example. Governor Scott Walker in Wisconsin survived a recall attempt.
So direct democracy lets citizens make policy directly, like marijuana legalization.
Exactly. Colorado's Amendment 64 is a prime example. Voters legalized recreational marijuana via initiative when the legislature likely wouldn't have, even though it conflicted with federal law. Other states followed.
But it raises questions.
Definitely. Conflicts with federal law, for one.
Yep.
And the broader question, is it always good for citizens to have that much direct power? Are voters equipped to decide complex policy?
What are the drawbacks?
Well, it demands a lot more from voters understanding complicated issues. Turnout on ballot measures is often lower than for candidates. People might rely on confusing titles, misleading ads, or just recommendations, potentially leading to bad outcomes. The force might mention California's Prop 8 on same-sex marriage as an example, some point too. And there's always the concern that wealthy individuals or special interests can just flood the airwaves and essentially buy the outcome they want.
Wow. Okay, that was definitely a deep dive. We covered a lot of ground on U.S. voting and elections. Let's try to sum up the big takeaways.
All right. We saw voter registration is crucial, but the process varies hugely state by state, with this long history of both expanding access and sometimes restricting it.
Voter turnout, influenced by tons of things, demographics, those systemic factors like ID laws or registration hurdles, and even how we measure turnout changes the picture.
Elections themselves are this whole sequence. Candidates deciding to run, navigating campaign finance rules, which are, well, complex and always changing thanks to courts like with Citizens United.
Yeah.
Then nomination through primaries or caucuses. the conventions.
Leading to the general election, the electoral college deciding the presidency, and campaigns using increasingly sophisticated strategies, heavily leaning on technology, trying to understand how voters tick.
And finally, direct democracy initiatives, referendums, recalls giving citizens direct power, but with its own set of benefits and potential problems.
Thinking back to that Buttigieg example at the start, maybe it wasn't just about his experience level, but his ability to connect, to communicate complex stuff clearly. That seems vital now.
It really does. And maybe the most surprising thing, or at least clarifying, is seeing how turnout looks so different depending on the denominator. High percentage of registered voters turnout, much lower percentage of eligible voters. It really suggests registration and engagement barriers might be bigger obstacles than just pure apathy for many people.
It's definitely food for thought. So for you, the listener, to ponder, as information gets easier to access, but debates over voting rights and election security continue, how is all this going to evolve? What's the future of registration and turnout look like?
Yeah, what role will technology keep playing? What about citizen activism? How will these forces shape the way Americans participate in their democracy in the years ahead?
Lots to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.